This is the Scholar General, Mo Jiang Dianbing. So today I wanted to talk about the Jian, or the Chinese double-edged straight sword. This is just going to be a really brief introduction. Let's start with the history. The Jian has its origins in the Chinese Bronze Age, and basically daggers became longer and longer until it was no longer useful to call it a dagger, so they started calling the long ones Jian, or swords. I'm not going to talk about bronze Jian too much in this video, but basically they saw use until they were phased out and eventually completely replaced by steel weapons during the Han Dynasty. During the Han Dynasty, long two-handed steel Jian became pretty popular for a bit, but the Jian's days were kind of numbered because it largely got phased out of the military in favor of the single-edged sword, or the Dao. So from the Han Dynasty onwards, the Jian was basically regulated to civilian life, which meant it would serve either as like a status symbol for the elite or potentially a sidearm for a local militia or something like this. Now, it's also important to point out that over time, the Jian has become kind of closely associated with the Chinese religion Taoism, which basically the double-edged sword can be seen as like a talisman which wards off evil spirits and stuff like this. So now that we've gone over the history a little bit, let's talk about the design and function of this weapon. So unfortunately I don't have a Jian here to show you guys, but we're gonna have to make do without, and let's start by talking about the blade. Jian blades are usually made with something called a Sanmei construction, which just means like a 3-plate construction. And what you do is you take a high carbon content piece of steel and you put it in the middle of the blade, and then you sandwich this with 2 softer pieces of steel. What this does is it means that as you sharpen the blade over time and slowly remove material, you're always going to have that harder steel on the edge, which can stay sharper for longer. This kind of construction probably also is conducive to a diamond cross section, which is why you frequently see Jian with a diamond cross section. Another thing to know about the blades is that the length can vary a bunch. They can be pretty long, and sometimes you can find ones that are quite short. In general, for a one-handed sword, they probably are averaging somewhere between 27 to 30 inches in length. So now that we've talked about the blade, let's go down and talk about the hilt. We'll start with like the handguard and the pommel. They're usually made out of cast bronze, and they can be engraved with all kinds of designs and motifs, from like dragons, phoenixes, pretty much anything that the person wanted. And then the handle was usually made out of wood, or it could be made out of wood that's wrapped with ray skin, which can provide a really secure grip. All the hilt components were put onto the blade by pining, which basically means you have the blade and then there's a piece of iron that sticks out, and you slide all the components on it, and then you heat up the end of this tang and you hammer it down onto the hilt to compress everything and make it really solid. A lot of the time in modern Chinese martial arts, you'll see like a tassel hanging down from the end of the handle, and it just kind of flopping around, and you don't really know what it's there for. Basically, in the past, it was usually like a lanyard, which is like a loop that you can stick your hand through, and it means that if you drop your sword while using it, it's still attached to your wrist hanging, and you can pick it up really easy. So that's kind of the more useful function of it. That's the end of this video. This is the brief introduction to the Jian, and later on I'll talk about the other category of Chinese sword, the Dao. Thanks everybody for watching the video, and please subscribe and support the channel on Patreon. Thanks.